responsive things, but I
Mhm.
definitely want to replace my income.
Got you.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, so I love it. I do. I love it. I am excited about this because I think it's got a lot of legs. So where to start? Well, one, um, starting at the most essential level, which is I think not that my opinion, is the arbiter of truth or anything, but I think that this is needed. And I also see not only do I think is needed, but I also think is needed in the marketplace. I
Mhm.
think there is a massive opening for something like this. And in episode 8 of my show on Vice, we
Mhm.
did a brand called Harlem Cycle.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
and to support that episode, because every episode, like, we also did some research behind it, and like,
Mhm.
there's a whole production effort behind the episode. So we got to take a really close look at wellness for urban and
Mhm.
particularly like inner city communities,
Mhm.
and how, it's not, you don't have to have a PhD to know that it's just not prevalent, it's not cutting across. There's a whole lot of reasons. Um, there's a much bigger concentration of soul cycles and equinoxes and stuff like that
Mhm.
in more affluent neighborhoods, and the cost
Mhm.
prohibitive and stuff like that. So it's a known market opportunity.
Mhm.
Um, it's a worthy one. It's a big problem, which,
Mhm.
the nature of big problems is it's difficult, right?
Mhm.
They're difficult, but, you know, um, problems that are difficult have equal and reciprocal, size of, upside, right? Like
Right.
a simple problem is it's what we would call like a me too business. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, if you can think it up easy and, whatever. So this type of business, there's room. The great news and the reason that we ended up moving forward with Harlem Cycle when we were casting is because I couldn't think of someone whom is a clear winner in the
Mhm.
space,
Mhm.
right? There hasn't been anyone that kind of has emerged, and that's
Mhm.
not to say that this is a winner takes all market, because I don't
Right.
think that's the case. But I do think there are certain industries where, um, clear winners have emerged, and
Mhm.
there's just a big white space here, and I
Mm.
don't think it makes sense for SoulCycle to enter. Like, there's a bunch of reasons why more established, um, chains don't enter the hoods,
Mhm.
it just doesn't make sense for them. It's not
Right.
brand consistent, they can't
Right.
afford it because they gotta
Uh-huh.
pay their teachers a certain amount. So I think, you know, making this so that it's, like, inclusive by design, by DNA
Mhm.
from the
Mhm.
beginning, like you're
Yes.
doing,
Yes.
you know, will inform the entire decision-making process from the root onward,
Right.
from price point and
Yeah.
messaging to branding, blah, blah, blah. And so, now that we've, like, touched on that essential portion, kinda moving on from there, I love Hype Wellness. It's a great name.
Thank
It's a
you.
great name. You
Thank
can't under I
you to
don't under
trademark it.
yeah, I don't by the way, trademarks are, implied. For instance,
Okay. If I
I
got it.
launched Equity Apparel.
Okay.
You might have known I launched this Equity
Yeah,
Apparel,
I bought a
and
hoodie
Oh,
actually.
you did? Oh,
I
awesome.
did.
And, there was a brand called Equity Apparel already, Equity
Okay.
Apparel Co., and they're a pain in my ass because I looked at them, they're a bunch of, like, young kids. I get it, but they're not moving a whole lot of merch and not really putting a lot into it, but
Right.
my lawyer ended up doing some research, and not only were they not registered and didn't have it trademarked, but
Mhm.
still trademark, will protect whomever was first and has
Okay.
had continuous usage.
Okay.
So don't worry, you're protected there.
Okay.
And if anyone tries to, step on your toes, you can, enforce, legal action if
Okay.
need be.
If need.
So don't
Okay.
worry, you're protected there.
Okay.
But I love the effect of a good name.
Mhm.
I just think there's like 3 categories of names in my view. There's like, it hurts you, there's neutral, like it doesn't hurt or help, and then there's names that help. And
Mhm.
you happen to be in the help, like the name helps because of that first word,
Yeah.
hype, it makes it clear that this is for, us,
Yeah. Exactly.
and then
Yeah.
wellness kind of rounds it out. So it's nice and clean.
Mhm.
As I look through your site, it's clear to me that you've invested in the
Mhm.
presence,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
I see designed assets. I see there's a beautiful video that I saw,
Mhm.
um, where it looks like drone footage,
It is. Yeah,
and
I
you
had
are
so so my design thinking person who helped me with that, they told me that really that's one, or they helped me identify that video, or like my photographer is one of my key investments. So I did invest there.
yep, and where are you there? That's amazing.
I'm at the Pacifica Beach, like not too far from San Francisco.
It's beautiful.
It
Are you
is.
in living in San Fran, or were you living in Indianapolis?
I'm living in San Leandro
You
right
are.
now, and I work in
Okay.
Berkeley School District right
Oh,
now.
gotcha.
So yeah,
Okay.
but all that's connected, so it's just about 40-minute drive.
Yep, yep. Um, cool. Yeah, that helps me. And then, as I look on, like, I love there's an image. You have a bunch of images that I like, but there's one in particular where it's a yellow backdrop and you're holding your foot and
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
very iconic imagery. And
Uh-huh.
it plays off of it could tell it's clearly intentional because you had the brand.
Mhm.
So whatever you like, let's just say, like, your foundation is solid, so I
Yeah.
want to reaffirm you and reassure you there, like, I like what you're doing,
Yeah.
okay? And now in order to kinda continue going, here's what I would this is how I like to approach these, like, here's what I would do if I were you.
Yes, that's what I'm looking for. If you
Okay,
were
great.
me.
Yeah, so look, I've learned in my career now that building brand has the most upside in business. Um And here's what I mean, right? It's like, it's one thing to build, and I think that there are a lot of brandless practices, particularly in yoga,
Mhm.
where, you're kind of confined to the four walls. So, it's more geographically driven
Mhm.
than anything else, right? And so people
Mhm.
will go to whatever's approximate. And in a
Mhm.
few cases, some studios become destination traffic where people will they'll pass wherever is closest to them and go to this one hot spot.
Mhm.
What I think the opportunity is because you're addressing, a need that really exists everywhere in the country,
Yes. Yes.
um, I personally would be building, and investing like you're doing in the brand that is Hype Wellness.
Mhm.
Now, as that brand grows, the nice thing about brand is, like, now, for instance, brand is like trust, people trust you.
Mhm.
And so, like, when I launch these sessions, you guys know that you can pay and you know that you'll get value, and so that
Mhm.
trust is there. I can drop
Yeah.
merch and stuff like that. And so what I envision for Hype Wellness is to build that brand so that you can drive traffic to your actual, classes. You can
Mhm.
experiment. You'll have the
Mhm.
luxury of having options of
Mhm.
products.
Mhm.
And what I can't tell you is, "Hey, what's the best product for your audience?" Because the market tells you that. And
Mhm.
so to me, the founder that has options and has the luxury to be able to experiment,
Mhm.
um, is the entrepreneur that increases their probability of success, right?
Okay.
Because if you start with this super brandless approach, which I don't think you were going for anyway, but just focusing on just the classes, I
Mhm.
think shorts is, um, just cuts
Limits.
the visions
Yeah.
off at the feet, right?
Yeah.
So now what would I like to see you do? Well, I like the content. I would encourage, you continuing to drop this mix of you have some still image, you have some photo, I see you have some nutrition kind of stuff.
Mhm.
I wanna warm it up a little bit and
Mhm.
have I think we need more video content, right?
Okay.
And it doesn't have to the good news is it doesn't have to be super high production
Mhm.
quality. Like,
Mhm.
what I want to do is build you as an authority in this space,
Mhm.
and authority doesn't necessarily, in this case, have to mean, "Hey, I've been doing yoga the longest."
Mhm.
Where I actually wanna put brand equity in is what you spent 15 minutes establishing, which is, "Hey, I'm doing this for this community."
Mhm.
And so for me, the great opportunity that I never see any yogis do, 'cause there's plenty of yogis where they do the poses and stuff like that, and
Mhm.
you'll have yours, and you have yours. You can
Mhm.
showcase that you can do these things, but I haven't seen anyone really create content intentionally and systematically around how wellness kinda integrates with communities of color,
Yes. Yeah.
right? And
Uh-huh.
that is the biggest opportunity.
Yes.
So for me, w right, and you'll see these things have long tail benefits, like,
Mhm.
I'm just now really starting to reap maximum rewards for the efforts of my having laid the infrastructure of, you know, putting in the reps so I can get good on at, expressing myself on the medium, but also getting
Mhm.
the kinks down and all this other stuff, and I can share a key learning to that is developing what I call or in what is called a pillar series,
Okay.
which is like something that is episodic.
Okay.
Episode 1, 2, 3, 4. Now look, I want you to put thought into what this pillar series is gonna be, and I'm gonna explain why it's really, really critical, okay?
Mhm.
So the pillar series is something that is at the intersection of what your brand is about and
Mhm.
what your customers care about.
Mhm.
So where I see people go wrong is if you have a yoga practice, people will make content, like, on yoga. That's clear, that's low-hanging fruit. But
Mhm.
because you have an intersection here where it's, like,
Mhm.
wellness and communities of color, I
Yes.
think you have really nice white space to create
Mhm.
something that you can use as a magnet. Like, people will discover the yoga practice as a result of tuning into this content that you're creating,
Mhm. Okay.
right? You know what
Mhm.
I mean? So
Mhm.
it could be, um I mean, you'll probably know better than me, but l as an example, like, it could be, you know, the ooh, like, how wellness we'll have to get creative, but it's, like,
Yeah.
essentially how wellness affects communities of color. It could
Yeah.
be breaking down, some things in hip hop or breaking
Yeah.
down, high profile people that have tapped spiritual levels
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
do you have
Yeah.
an idea?
I feel you. I'm getting you. Yeah, because that's one thing I actually think about sometimes is like rap music, and I think about how like sometimes people think they're lying, but maybe all along they were just like doing affirmations, to make it come true.
Mm.
It can get a little
Ooh.
dicey on some of the lyrics, but maybe
It
these were affirmations.
It c see, so that is something that's in the pocket that
Uh huh.
people are gonna wanna tune in,
Mhm.
and then you're building this, right? And the key about the pillar is I want it to be, um, a format. I've fallen into this trap where I've created a format that was difficult for me to sustain.
Okay.
Right? Like, so when I launched, I wanted to do a Q&A format where people ask questions, which, by the way, is an excellent format, but you need to have the volume of questions, and I
Right.
just didn't have that when I was starting out. I could probably do it now.
Right.
Then I started another thing where, like, the format was just, like, too much high it was too high production quality, and it
Okay.
was difficult to sustain because every time I needed to do it, I needed to have a team
Right.
there.
Yeah.
So, like, I
Yeah.
I want you to be
Okay.
practical about, like, "Hey,
Yeah.
what's something that I can easily sustain?"
Uh huh.
Right? And so my current rendition of that is, like, I'm doing these JH dailies because all I gotta do is jump in front of my mic, which I already I invested one time and, I'm already comfortable on the medium.
Okay.
So don't be discouraged by you may start and stop, and
Mhm.
that's totally natural. Like, people will get bummed out and they're like, "Yo,
Mhm.
like," that's totally natural, and I want you to experiment, right? And you'll be dialing in your messaging.
Mhm.
And I want you to resist the temptation to focus on, like, views and, like, the standard metrics. What I
Mhm.
want you to focus on instead of quantitative metrics are more qualitative metrics.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
for me, and I felt this way from the jump, and
Mhm.
I've seen myself be right over time
Mhm.
because people that were overly optimized on things that, got shares and likes, like, they they might have they were maybe winning in the short term, but
Mhm.
I was focused. I didn't care if it was an audience of 100 or
Mhm.
50. I was looking to dial in for
Mhm.
something for what I was looking for always, I remember, was someone to write, like, a paragraph of a comment where,
Mhm.
like, people look at the amount of comments. For me, it was always mind blown, like, to type, like, to put a couple emojis is not the same as someone writing like, "Hey, this impact I 100% agree what you're saying, sis. Like, I went through this
Mhm.
exact same thing." One of those means so
Mhm.
much to me because someone took the time to write that and share their experience.
Mhm.
So I want you to just tune out quantitative,
Yeah.
and just
Okay.
focus on qualitative.
Mhm.
and experimenting, you're experimenting and you'll be honing in and finding you'll know when you're in the pocket, right?
Mhm.
Like, when
Mm.
I started dialing in my messaging of, like, building generational wealth for communities of
Mhm.
color, like, that
Mhm.
didn't come to me right away,
Yeah.
and it just started resonating, and
Yeah.
then you'll see some of the quantitative metrics pop
Right.
because then, like, you start, building
Yeah.
it up, right? So
Yes.
now I'm going to um, share with you how I would, being you, kind of build the beginning of your audience, which I see your audience is a decent size. You're starting out. This is to me an incredibly valuable tool. Okay, you find other pages that are similar to yours
Mm.
or pages that you aspire to be like.
Mhm.
Okay, and the followers of those pages have essentially already, you know, pre-selected themselves to be interested in that subject matter because they're
Mhm.
following that page and they're engaging.
Mhm.
So, the natural thing to do then is to click through to their followers
Mhm.
and engage with them so
Mhm.
that then they enter your funnel because you're pinging them by
Mm.
liking a photo or commenting,
Mhm. Yeah.
and then they'll come over to your page.
Okay.
And as long as your bio and your photo and your page is tight, you should get
Mhm.
a follow back,
Mhm.
right? So what
Okay.
I did was like I went and found all the other minority entrepreneurs
Mhm.
and, then I started following their and then I came across software that actually automates this for you. Here's where it gets dicey. You don't want to be a spam bot
No,
because
I
I
don't.
see a lot of people like automate comments and stuff. When
Yeah.
I was starting, I found the happy medium where I didn't allow this software to engage on my behalf, not comment on my behalf, but at least like on my behalf, so
Okay.
that people were like, "Huh." It'll like 3 photos,
Uh-huh.
right? And then people will say, "Well, who's this?" And then they'll click through,
Right.
right?
Right.
And
Right.
then you have an opportunity for them to enter your orbit,
Mhm.
and then if you're producing content that's resonant, you're
Mhm.
nurturing them over time.
Yes.
You're nurturing them over time, okay?
Mhm.
So
Okay.
I did this to start. That's how I built probably my first 5,000 followers, maybe
Okay.
10,000, a mixture of, experimenting and but I can't stress how important it is though. They're all already pages that have put in the work to build the exact audiences that you're resonant with.
Yes.
And when
Yes.
I did this research, I found that there were some entrepreneurs and I that like have very similar audience profiles where our
Mhm.
contents are a great fit. So
Yes.
then that leads me to the next bucket, which is
Uh-huh.
collaboration is huge.
Yes.
You can invite these pages. I like using interviews as like a Trojan horse.
Mhm.
You invite them, "Hey, let's jump on an IG live.
Mhm.
Let's, give them an outlet where you guys can interview and what have you." And then, it's
Mhm.
kind of simple arbitrage, like those people will discover you.
Mhm.
And no one thing is gonna like make you pop, but it's a
Right.
combination of these things that have you build the first beginnings of your audience. And here's why I think this is important, right? Just to zoom out for a second. It's not that we're talking about growing an audience sake for just growing an audience sake, right? Because it might seem disconnected from the business,
Mhm.
but rather, I think that um, building brand and that trust, especially in a medium like Instagram where it's visual and it lends itself really well to something like yoga,
Mhm.
and this to me allows you to build just like a brand that is not geographically constrained.
Yeah.
It's true that you may, have the highest ROI from customers that are in your immediate vicinity.
Mhm.
But from the beginning, I want you to architect the brand so that it's speaking to the core of that issue across communities. And
Yes.
right now, with the COVID thing and how it's affecting communities of color, you have a really nice news peg there. In other words, like something relevant and fresh, with all this pain that's
Mhm.
going on in communities of color. You have
Mhm.
another white space there to address healing in our
Mhm.
communities. Like it just so happens that the macro is very timely for a business like yours to exist.
Mhm.
And so, while I understand and recognize that, the highest ROI in terms of replacing your income in the short term is, so let's say, is going to come from classes. What I think actually is you'll have a longer tail and a much bigger upside
Mhm.
if you're investing first in that infrastructure of building the brand, because
Yes.
then you're growing kind of nationwide and you're
Mhm.
growing and you're growing. And then later on, you can experiment with dropping a product
Right.
that can be purchased from anywhere
Right.
And you'll see how the revenue you'll make from that once your brand is up will be far
Mhm.
greater than selling classes, in you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So, I also want you to when you have your and I know we're over, but I just can't help it.
It's okay. I
Uh,
appreciate
yeah,
it.
and I know, so when you do your classes and stuff like that, like, I pretty much just want you to think of any and all opportunities to generate content from it,
Mhm.
because I want to leverage something that you're already doing,
Mhm.
which is your classes and things like that, and
Mhm.
if you can film them, you're just repurposing the moment. That way, that class goes from living beyond, that moment
Mhm.
into, other moments you can, kind of you can do
Yes.
yoga poses for, folks in the hood, or
Yeah.
you could, yoga for the hood, like, you can
Yeah.
play with you have a lot of really playful things here that
Yeah.
you can do,
Mhm.
and I just think it's a wonderful opportunity. And again, to keep it zoomed out, it's like I want you to just begin thinking about that overlap,
Mm.
right? Which you told me that overlap, right? Like that's where you want to occupy it.
Yes.
And so let's find different ways that we can fulfill that white
Mhm.
space. And don't be afraid to experiment and even start and stop. I think that's
Mhm.
really important, you know.
Mhm.
And with your pillar, develop it. If you see
Mhm.
it, you know, you'll know. So, go ahead.
I'm wondering about the Pillar series.
Mhm,
So I'm thinking about platforms. Should this be so I've already considered that it would be probably good for me to start like a YouTube or a
mhm.
Patreon. I have a podcast where I'm doing like um short meditations. So I'm just like kind of curious what your thoughts might be on that.
It's a great question. So this is like tactically how I like to approach pillar series is I
Mhm.
like for them to be a little bit longer form and a
Mhm.
little bit more off the cuff and kind of less scripted. Not a
Okay.
lot of people will prefer that.
Okay.
Um, some people just thrive in a more structured environment, but
Mm.
the reason I find it really helpful to have like one take kind of thing where you can just kind of speak freely is
Okay.
because it gives you a lot more to play with when you repurpose,
Okay.
okay?
Yeah.
And just to give you a very transparent look into my content machine is I have an editor that I pay, $400 a month, and
Mhm.
he produces about 25 pieces for me a month
o-
of content,
Okay.
but it's only possible because we have pillar content.
Okay.
So
Huh.
so
I'm not sure that I understand then what pillar
Mhm.
content is because I was thinking this is like a yoga series or like a talking series.
Yep, yep,
Am I
that's what
right?
I
Oh,
mean.
it
Yep,
is?
that's
Okay,
a
but it's like
100%,
it's see okay, but I
but it's
maybe I do it all at once, but then I segment it or something.
well, like, so here's what I mean. Let's say, you're gonna do, yoga for Black people,
Yeah.
let's say, or wellness for Black folks. Whatever you wanna call it, you'll come up with some kitschy name.
Uh-huh.
When you're sitting in front of the podcast and you're speaking at length for 25 minutes,
Okay.
okay?
Yeah.
And then the next day, then you're speaking at length, you're speaking at length.
Okay.
And
Okay.
but what happens is you're saving that content.
Mm-hmm.
And in those 25 minutes, you're gonna have a few good moments.
Mm-hmm.
And those
Mm-hmm.
are moments that you can pull,
Oh,
repackage, and
yeah.
drop as a standalone piece of content. And then
Yes.
you're going to see some efficiency start to come about where you don't need to recreate the wheel every time you wanna drop a piece of content. You can
Okay.
actually just pull from those moments.
Okay.
Right?
Oh,
So, like, for me, for instance, I'm recording these sessions. I'm doing back to back to back to back to for weeks.
right.
I'm saving these, saving these, saving these, saving these, saving these, and I'm
Yes.
flagging when and then I'm uploading them, and then they're you're gonna see a lot like, we're generating a lot of content coming out of
Uh-huh.
this, right?
Yeah.
And so I want you to look at your yoga business in the same way. Like,
Yes.
"Hey, what
Okay.
things am I already doing that I
Yeah.
could just repurpose this?" Because
Okay.
the reality is of a small operation,
Mhm.
you're gonna need to make a whole lot of lemonade out of just a few lemons. So if
Yes.
you're already doing the class, I want you to get the photos, I want you to get the videos, I want
Yeah.
you to speak to the people
Yes.
afterwards and share their experience and why they wanna
Yeah.
go and all that kinda stuff. So
Okay, I need to prioritize that because you're right that I'm so lost in the moment that I'm like, this is not a time for pictures. This is not a time for the camera. But I
mhm.
need to like get those snippets.
Yeah, and I'll say this too, because I realize, like, yoga and mindfulness is all about being present.
Yeah.
So, maybe it's 1 class a week where you do it
Mhm.
so
Okay.
that you can be present and the other
Yeah.
ones and stay true to what you're
Yeah.
saying.
Yes.
But that there's 1 class a week where people wear fun clothes and,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
so you'll come up with your own workaround, but I
Okay.
guess just to wrap to zoom, to, encapsulate, I
Okay.
love the brand,
Okay.
very needed,
Thank
huge
you.
market opportunity.
Mhm.
You're doing all the right things. You're
Mhm.
investing into your presence, I can tell you're building a
Mhm.
small audience. Um, can let's take it one step above and, create the freedom for yourself to experiment with
Mhm.
types of content that they could be raw,
Mhm.
but I want you to start experimenting with speaking on subjects that are at the intersection of, like, what we talked about,
Yes.
um, and make sure that the things that we're already doing in the business, we can recapture and repurpose and
Mhm.
just give you some extra mileage out of it, and
Okay.
then don't forget that piece as well around targeting followers of similar pages, 'cause
Yes.
you'll
Okay.
see they've already done the work of building those pages.
Okay.
And once you bring them into your community, you can get to 5, 10,000, in the short term, I
Mhm.
would say. And the reason that's, it's not like you always have to prioritize growth, but once you have like a nice 5, 10,000 folks, that ends up becoming a great sandbox for
Mhm.
you to just test against,
Mhm.
test messaging, and so forth. So all in all, I think you're in a great place. And I commend you on, whatever your intuition is, keep
Mhm.
trusting it because it's
Okay.
led you to a great place so far.
Okay. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Cool. Well, that email that I sent you to schedule, that's my actual personal email. So,
Okay.
drop me a line at any time. Here, I want to be a resource to you as if you like are as you're deliberating your pillar. If you're like, hey, what do you think about this? Or
Mhm.
should I, or you want to send me content or
Mhm.
whatever, I'll follow the business just did. And as if I see anything that I think would be good for my audience, I'll share it, and so
O
we can kinda get some synergies going.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm excited for you. I
Thank
think it's
you.
gonna be a fun ride.
Thank you. I'm excited too. It's this is affirming. I feel like my heart is telling me I'm in the right direction. And especially like being in this area that's so like culturally rich and like all of the Black Panthers starting here and all of that beauty, stuff that I'm getting to learn about. I'm putting right into, I don't know, letting that shine through in what I'm doing as well too. So,
I love it. I love
all
it. All the
right.
best to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk soon.
All right. Bye.
Cheers.